Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. I'm with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Welcome, friends, and thank you for taking the time to join us on this Wednesday evening, the day before Thanksgiving. And I know that we have so much to be grateful for and so much to be thankful for, especially in this country where we are so blessed. And I do pray that all of you are finding time to gather together with friends and family, extended loved ones, and your pets, and that you have meal and plans to share time together, laughter, conversation, and momentous occasion, and that all of that will bless your lives, and that because we really don't take enough time to honor each other as family and to tell one another how much we do love each other. And you know, at any moment, we're not promised any more tomorrows, and that any day we could be called home. And so anytime we can gather together and celebrate moment and give honor and worship and praise to the Most High for all the blessings of just simple existence is just an incredible, momentous, and awesome time. And so, and for those of you that can and those of you that can't, I pray for all of you in the same way. But this evening, I have as guest with me my good friend, Dr. Joye Pugh, who has been doing interviews and videos and different work with me for a number of years now, going back to 2007, which already is quite a lengthy bit of time. But both she and I, we have been brought together in such way as to be confirming witness to each other on certain aspects of our work. Certainly we, are not 100% aligned on everything, and nobody really is, but on the very most important things, we are certainly been brought to similar discernment. And one of those keys, which I think is so critical for understanding the aspects of the gospel that most do not, including even what we'll be going into shortly, to begin the whole premise of this show, the parable of the sower, which, unless you have this discernment, it just does not make sense. And the connections to what happened in the garden, the metaphorical and symbolic, all of that, as far as what happened in the beginning and its connections to the end, the harvest, the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, all of that is so critical. And this is skeleton key for helping people to understand the gospel, the differences between Ishmael and Isaac and Jacob and Esau and David and Goliath and those wars, and even the wars of Israel with the sons of Anak, and the commandment to kill every man, woman, and child when entering into the promised land. All those things are critical on this information. And so, Dr. Joye, are you with us this evening?
Yes, Dan. Thank you so much for having me back on your show again tonight. I look so forward to being your guest over the next 2 hours and us being able to really just get deeper into all the things that we know are really spoken to us in the Word of God, and really just, I think, have been overlooked. Now, they may have been overlooked for a significant reason, because the more you really open people's eyes to this information, you kind of wonder that the powers that be that rule these kingdoms that we live in this fallen world just really did not want humanity to know the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So it's wonderful to be able to be your guest and be able to talk about those truths that are really right before our eyes if we'll just take note of it.
Well, likewise, Dr. Joye, I'm always appreciative to you for taking the time to join us and to make yourself available in the ways that you do. And I count every opportunity just a true blessing. And I know, especially with the situation with Mel's health, and I do ask the listening audience and those that will tap into the archives later to please continue with your prayers for Dr. Joye and her husband Mel, and really include myself and all the rest of us in your prayers as well. And likewise, we do pray for you as well, and hope that all of us are blessed in that way and are put under the wing of grace and protection through our Lord and Yeshua Christ and the Most High God and the Holy Spirit. And but I do want to start just really quick with the parable of the sower, because I think that will set the foundation, especially for a lot of new listeners or those that are not familiar with your work. We will be focused on the third book of Dr. Joye's series, Beguiled from Eden to Armageddon, which is a 3-book set of her most recent book release, and a lot of information. Actually, Dr. Joye, can you tell the listening audience, just kind of give them a rundown on where to go to get your books, the ones that you've done previously, and a general description of what each one of the new series is about in your website information?
Yes, my website is www.drjoye, and it's DRJOYE. That's Joy with an E, JOYE.com. And all of my books and things are there, and all you have to do is just click on. And I also have some areas you can click on, and it really kind of tell you what's in each one of the books. Actually give you page numbers as well there. But those things are there. My YouTube things are there. My music is there. And then the main thing is to really understand that this last series that's just come out is called Beguiled Eden to Armageddon, and it is a trilogy. It's volume 1, 2, and 3. And these particular books are taking you really, really in depth into a lot of things that are going on right now in society, and why things are happening the way they are. It really focuses really on everything, and it ties together why these things are happening all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Because if you want to understand the end of days, you really have to understand the beginning. And if you don't get the beginning right, then it doesn't make sense, and you can't put the pieces together appropriately to really see what's happening and why it's happening and why you're a part of it and why we're here and why we're at this point in time. So this trilogy was a huge undertaking, and it's the reason it took 3 books to get it all together, so that you could really get the focus of everything that has happened. And we're talking about things from nanotechnology to biotechnology to cloning, the Shroud of Turin. You know, I'm bringing in a lot of things with the pineal gland, and of course, what it means, like we have been talking about in the past when I've been on with Zen, is what really happened in the garden and why that is so significant. And then it brings you right on up to date as to what's happening when you turn the TV on and you see strange weather patterns and comets coming, out of nowhere, and asteroids, hitting the atmosphere, and why the sun's doing strange things, and why we're having earthquakes in various sundry places. And it really ties all these things together, and then it really explains to you about the Muslim Brotherhood and why we see America kind of going through what it's going through, and why really Israel and all the Middle East are having problems. And then it really explains who could literally be the ruling fashion of what's happening and why it's happening and why they're allowing it to happen. And I tie those bloodlines such that you can see that there is a serpent lineage that has come all the way from the Garden of Eden that still exists today on this planet, and why they are considered royals. And if you get the grasp of all of that, then when you turn on the TV or you hear shows like we're going to do tonight, then these things will make sense to you. It's not like we're just throwing out crazy information and just conspiracy theorists, we usually are called that. But I will say that, I feel like that even Zen's book and my books has been based on proof, evidence, scientific-based evidence, and we're not just grasping straws and throwing them out there for somebody just to buy a book. Our intent has been to always educate and to be able to bring to the table these things to really scientifically look at so that we can get a better grasp of why we are living in this time and why the things are occurring like they are. And this all came about, the trilogy came about because of my book, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, which was several years ago that I did. But that was a huge book that took me about 7 years to put together, and it literally is jam-packed full of information as well that really has information all the way to 2019 in it. So that book is not considered like an old book or out-of-date information. It is it's really a good read to go back either to read before you read the Begal series. And I have had some people read the Begal series and then go back and read the Eden series. And then I've had some people who read the Eden series, read the Begal series, and then they were like, oh my gosh, then I missed all this stuff in the Eden book. So they went back and read the Eden book, and they said they got a lot more out of that. So it depends on how far advanced you are in some of the topics that I cover, because in my Eden book, I limited the amount of information on each individual topic, where in the trilogy, I've kind of expanded on that and also offered other people's takes on these same things and brought in some things like were science cases and things like that to tie it all together. But I feel like that it really has just blossomed since the first book that I ever did on the subject, which was Antichrist, the clone image of Jesus Christ, which is no longer available. And a lot of people really want that little book, but I've tried to tell them that that book became the Eden book, and then the Eden book became the Begal series, so that you don't lose anything. So if you're out there and you're trying to desperately find one of the Antichrist books, don't worry about that. I have incorporated all that information and brought it forward because it's all relevant. I've never had any, when I think of my research, that I've had to say, well, that's not relevant anymore. I think from day one when I first started doing this research, everything that I pieced together is still relevant. I've just gotten more information to literally prove what I was saying back in 1999. And it's just more, it's more important information for you as a juror to look at it and say, my gracious, I didn't realize this was all happening right before my eyes. And I think the more evidence that I can bring to the table, then the more you can see why the things that Zen and I are talking about are so important.
Yeah, I think the critical thing that you said, Dr. Joye, is that you cannot understand the end unless you understand the beginning and how all things established itself as the foundation for what we have now, and why it is that we see such a prevalence of evil within the world, why it is that these Illuminati, secret societies, and fraternities and sisterhoods, those that are sitting on the thrones of the world, are working in tangent, covertly from behind the scenes to push this New World Order agenda, and how these things, even though we're in this material world, they're all being manipulated from spiritual powers, the fallen angels as powers of principalities, the rulers of darkness, wickedness in high places, Satan, the adversary, the accuser of humanity, and how this is really a spiritual war, even though it's unfolding here upon this planet, and that we are in fallen bodies, and that this is a fallen world. And that's why it is that we see and are learning through the duality and experiencing all the wide spectrum of both pain and pleasure. And so when, because everybody thinks that we're all good people and that everybody wishes the best for everybody else, but they fail to realize that there is a different kind of people, and that this bloodline, this lineage, does not wish or have good intentions for we as the seed of the woman, the sons of Adam, or nor the entirety of the world, humanity as a collective. They want to, rape, murder, and chaos, and insanity, and all the things that they push and promote, and that keep going. That's why we see the madness prevailing over the world. And so I'll get you to comment on that, Dr. Joye, and then I just want to read this real quick, this parable of the sower, to set the premise for all the things that we're going to go into this evening.
Well, what you have already brought up, Zen, is most important, because I think a lot of people, they turn on the TV and they are seeing things, let's just say, for example, the Ferguson situation, where there's so much unrest in our own country, and then that triggers places to have demonstrations, and then other people to get hurt, and people's properties to be damaged, and under the premise of that, well, somebody was done wrong. And, we have to look at all these situations and go back and say, what would have happened if nobody had done anything wrong in the very beginning? If the boy had not made a comment, or had not been doing something wrong, if he had just been doing right, then none of this would have ever happened. We don't go back and say it's important for each one of us every day of our life is to walk the way of right. And if we are Christians, we can't get on TV and then demand these demonstrations and go after hurting or pillaging somebody else's, something is wrong. It's like a person walking into a movie theater because they got mad with a girlfriend and mowing down all the people in the movie theater that had nothing, don't even know him. We're seeing more of this, and what this is the Cain spirit. And it's becoming as the days of Noah. And that's what's so worrisome to me, is that when God approached Cain about killing Abel, Cain looked at God, the Creator, and said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" He never apologized for killing Abel. He never asked God to forgive him. He didn't have any remorse. And when I see these things happening worldwide, ISIS, just the beheading of somebody that, doesn't mean anything at all, just for the sake of beheading and making a statement. It's love. There's no love for your fellow man. And I think what people are not getting is that the rulers, the powers that be, have set all this up. And I go back and I try to explain, just for example, slavery, and how the mob lynchings that occurred were much like what we're seeing now in a reversed order. But yet that was supposed to be so bad. We're supposed to move forward from that to today, in that we have government. Everybody is treated equal. If you are arrested, you have a right to an attorney. If you can't afford one is appointed for you. There's process, and there's a way to do this under a guideline of law. Well, if you're not willing to follow the guidelines of law, then everything becomes in one's hand. And then we see once it becomes, whenever you want to do what you want to do, that's selfish control. For example, if you go out and break in and steal a TV just because somebody shot somebody, that has nothing to do with improving the situation at all. And I'm really concerned, because I see that aspect happening, and then I see the aspect of people just walking into places and just shooting people for the sake in these schools, just mowing innocent kids down. Recently at the Florida State Library, we've got a young a lawyer that had really a grand opportunity at being. He looked very professional. He looked that he would have possibility to have a great, to have had a great career. But he mentioned things about handlers, and of course, then people will say, well, no, that's like a conspiracy. Well, it's interesting to me that when we studied the Monarch program, we studied the MK Ultra, those kinds of things, where people have been used to be like Manchurian candidates. They have handlers, and so you can't just dismiss this. And then when you go and you look at what has happened with the ISIS situation, and even in my Begal series, I talk about this unrest that has happened, in the Middle East. There was instances with Egypt in which all these uprisings occurred. And what was interesting is something that I also heard mentioned in Ferguson recently on the TV, is that we were trying to do peaceful demonstrations, and all of a sudden another group came in, and then things escalated. Well, in Egypt, that same thing really happened, except the people that came in didn't have the same dialect as the people who were really starting to do the first protests and trying to do demonstrations for bettering their situation there in Egypt. But on top of all of that, these people that kind of came in, they also were carrying all the same kind of cell phones, and they also were carrying identical towels. So it's like there may be a group of people that are being set up to when something goes a little awry, then this group of people goes in and then just insinuates more and drives, it gets people into a frenzy. And then, unfortunately, when people get in a mob, they don't feel, if it was just them doing it, they may not do it. But if everybody's doing it, they think, well, everybody's doing it, I'm going to do it too. They don't stop and think, when you go to meet your maker, it didn't matter if everybody else was doing it. You're the one going to pay for what you did. And that's where a mob mentality is like a pack of wolves or a pack of dogs. One-on-one, you might have a chance, but if you have a pack, then everybody's kind of doing it because everybody's doing that. And I've been able to see with the research that I'm doing that we're not having this just in the United States with the Ferguson thing. We had it with the Wall Street thing here in the United States. We had it with the Trayvon Martin thing. We've had it with the shootings in the theaters by lone gunmen. And then we've had the ISIS situation, and we've had the Egyptians, and we've had the Syrian uprisings, and the Jordanians had issues, and then we've had the Iran and Iraq situation, and then, of course, we've had all that even went on with Putin. We've had situations even in China. Now, what happens in most places, let's just say China and Russia, when you start misbehaving, instead of our National Guard trying to go, hey, now, y'all just calm down, just don't do anything wrong, let's not throw a little bit of tear gas on you, make you move out of the way. In China and Russia, they just shoot you. In other words, you're doing wrong, bam, it's over with. You broke the law, that's it. That's the way that you can control people. What worries me, because I'm seeing so much unrest everywhere, and I go into great detail about this in my book, in my series, Begal, is that we're already set up with surveillance in this country. Now, with unrest like we're seeing, we have to bring in troops, then you're going to be pushing us into martial law.
Right.
And that means more surveillance, cameras on everything. So people, I feel like this, then, that there is somebody behind the curtain causing this to get worse and worse, so we can move the agenda along a little more to be able to herd the humans that have the right, that are really the seed of what was in the garden, together, and then eventually annihilate us. And they're using our own people, our own brothers, whether you be black, pink, purple, our own brothers against us. And we are so stupid, we can't see that we are being corralled, and they are behind the curtain making it happen. They are the wizards behind the curtain.
Right.
It's like your most evil person is never going to look at you, if they're really evil, and do something to your face if they don't want you to know it. A great evil person gets somebody else to do their dirty work for them while they're smiling in your face, and you think that they're your friend. And that's what worries me, is that the people that are smiling, oh, everything's fine. And the Bible tells us, there's going to be the promise of peace and safety in those last days. Well, I hate to say it. We've heard peace and safety about the Ebola situation. I have been preaching Ebola since my first book in 1999, in my Antichrist book, about Ebola, Marburg virus, and what we're going, what's coming to play and all that. But we heard, oh, don't worry, no problem. There is a problem. It's like the birds and the bees and the deaths of the fish. I go into detail about all that because these are things that come out in the news, and then you don't hear about them anymore, and people think, oh, it just went away, there's not a problem anymore. If you continue to do the research, instead of it going away, then it is getting a lot worse.
Right.
It's just not in the public eye. So it's a game that's being played with us, and it's a game like where you're wanting to go with this, that is all about the parable of the wheat and the tares.
Right. And this is, I did an interview not long ago with Fritz Springmeier, and this was the focus of our discussion about how they utilize certain aspects to hype up situations, and also with what's going on with Trayvon Martin and with what's happening in Ferguson. This same thing was done in Seattle with the World Trade Organization protests. There were certain elements that were working with the police, and they were sent into the crowd to push things so that they got out of control. And
That's right.
This is always done, the controlled opposition. In fact, I'm going to, because we're almost to break, I'm going to share real quick a passage from the Occult Technology of Power, which for those that have never heard about it, is an insider book on how they do this. It says, the so-called left-right political spectrum is our creation. In fact, it accurately reflects our careful, artificial polarization of the population on phony issues that prevents the issue of our powers from arising in their minds. The left supports civil liberties and opposes economic or entrepreneurial liberty. The right supports economic liberty and opposes civil liberty. Of course, neither can exist fully, which is our goal, without the other. We control the right-left conflict such that both forms of liberty are suppressed to the degree we require. Our own liberty rests not on legal or moral rights, but on our control of the government bureaucracy and courts, which apply the complex subjective regulations we dupe the public into supporting for our benefit. And they fund both sides. It's controlled opposition. They're the ones that hype things up so that it gets out of hand. And the people, like you said, with the crowd mentality, and they riot. And then it's the same government security measures, Homeland Security, that benefit. We'll be right back, everybody. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second segment. I have as guest with me this evening Dr. Joye Pugh. You can find her work, her book, and her music at drjoye.com, drjoye.com. I'm going to open this segment with just a few passages from the Matthew 13, the parable related to the sower, where Christ said, for verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear and have not heard them. And the reason I believe that he said this is because this is the skeleton key. It is so critical for understanding not only the secrets that are contained within the gospel, and that the Old and New Testament are foundation for, of which also many of the extra biblical, extra canonical texts also lend further description to, especially the Targumic, the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Torah. But this helps us to understand the world and the condition and what we're dealing with as a people, as a collective. So just a few sentences here. The kingdom of heaven is likened to a man which sowed good seed in his field, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. This parable of the garden and the coming up of both wheat and the tares is symbolic of what happened initially in the garden, where the enemy snuck into the garden and sowed the tares, and then when the blade sprung up, that's when the birth of the children, Cain, the firstborn son of the devil, he was the first hybrid and the first serpent seed, and then the angels who are the servants, they asked the Most High God, do you want us to go and gather them and to get rid of them now and initially? And a lot of people also ask why it is that the Most High allowed them to have continuance even through the flood. And the reason being is because this is the trial, the tribulation, the testing ground, the duality where we redetermine our allegiance to the Most High, and to where we learn, and that Christ would come into the flesh and show us by example what it is to be the truth and the way and the light, and that he would be the one to redeem us and to offer us grace and salvation and a chance for our return to our first estate. And so all that was to have continuance until the harvest, which in the parable of the wheat and the tares shows to us that he will be the one that ends the war, and that the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent would happen when he sends the angels as reapers out to gather together the tares for burning and the wheat for the barn. Dr. Joye, get you to comment on this, and then if you would speak about how this is especially specific to the third book of your series, the Begal series, because that one has a focus on all of this information and details it unlike any other book besides my fourth book that you can find.
Well, I want to read something from Begal Volume 2 that I wrote about this, and I just want to read maybe a page of this as the end, and we'll move on to that, because I feel like this, if people don't really understand about the tares, and since you've talked about that really that God cursed the serpent and put hatred between the serpent's seed and the woman's seed, according to Genesis 3:15. And the thing about it is, this final battle that we know is going to be called Armageddon, according to the Bible as well, is between God's wheat and Satan's tares. And I feel like that's really, we were talking about, it's on the horizon. But the main thing is that I don't think people realize that when the Bible references Satan's seed, it is referencing Satan's seed as tares. Now, when I did my research about finding out about just what are tares, I came to this understanding. I want to read this. Tares are aggravating weeds found in wheat fields. The ancients referenced tares as being a degenerative form of wheat, as it mimics wheat until late in its growth cycle. Tare seeds are comparable in size and shape to wheat seeds, but gray in color, and they rarely produce any fruit. Wheat seeds are edible and good for food, whereas tare seeds produce sickness or even death if they are consumed. In wheat fields, tare roots twist together with wheat roots to such magnitude that tares can only be separated from wheat at harvest time. Wheat grows longer, stronger, and at harvest time is filled with seed bowing in the wind. Tares are weak, but stand upright and proud, never bowing to the wind. Jesus' wheat and parables prove Satan and his lineage have been emulating and disguising themselves in God's wheat field for a long time. They've been with humanity since our very beginning, trying to overtake God's good crop of wheat. Satan planted his seed among God's field, which was an act of blatant disrespect for God. Jesus' parable tells us these tares were allowed to grow until God's harvest is completed, because if tares are removed before the time, they can damage the roots of some of God's good wheat. And I go on to say that Satan's evil seeds display a form of godliness but deny the power of God. These evil beings are proud, boastful, lovers of flesh, even wear a crucifix around their necks, but never bow or humble themselves before God. They not only inhabit places of sin in this world, they infiltrate sanctuaries in order to destroy true Christianity by promoting their social gospel atmosphere, which is one without condemnation. They hide their serpent gray color under a skin of flesh so they can walk unnoticed among humanity, wrapping their tentacles around us, choking life from us, and trying to uproot us from ever receiving paradise with our Creator at His coming harvest. One thing is for certain, God's great harvest is going to bring an end to this age by forever separating His wheat from Satan's tares. And I wanted to read that because I can't say that any more plainer, and I want people to understand that this is a very serious thing, and that's why the parable references wheat and tares, because it really is telling us what's going on right now in our world and why this has been allowed to grow. Because I've heard people say, well, why didn't God just strike all these people dead? There's a reason behind the madness, and I think the wheat and tares parable explains exactly why God is doing what He's doing.
Yes, and not only that, but the wheat and the tares, literally, the creation also speaks of the same hidden, what Christ said, I will utter secrets hidden since the foundations of the world, and that He was the one that really emphasized this with all the parables of Matthew chapter 13, so that we could understand what is being hidden from us and what's going on from behind the scenes and how things got to be where they are. And so, yes, even the creation is a reminder of this very important and critical information.
Well, I want to read another little thing.
Please do, Doctor.
From the Begal Volume 2, because I think this is also important, because when Jesus spoke in these parables, and we know that in Matthew 13:13, when He said, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand.
Right.
What I go on to say is this. Most snakes are blind or have extremely poor eyesight. They see more in infrared. Infrared involves longer wavelengths on the red edge of the visible light spectrum that is used for night vision, where heat generates as colors when an organism moves. That color movement is how snakes see. Snakes also have a strange way of hearing that differs from all other species. They react only to sound waves that affect the harmonic resonance of Earth's electromagnetic grid. Instead of hearing sounds like voices or music in the air, they feel its resonance through the ground. Snakes react to music that produces a certain beat or melody, like a cobra reacts not to the voice of the charmer, but to the vibration of the music being played by a flute called a pungi. It is a hollow gourd with two reeds that makes a drooning or droning constant sound, and that is why Mozart named his opera The Magic Flute, which exposed secret harmonic influences on the pineal gland just like it does on a cobra. The cobra rises up just like the serpent rises up the human spine when humans sit in a cobra position chanting a mantra of Kundalini. This technique is how Satan, the covering cherub, uses the harmonic resonance of Earth's vibrations to control those who follow him. Vibration of the pineal gland puts humans into a hypnotic state, causing them to become spiritually blind and without spiritual hearing, just like Satan. That's why Psalms 58:4 warns, their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the death adder that stoppeth her ear. Satan is a very aggressive serpent, and if you open yourself up to him, he's going to take you over and drive you right straight into the gates of hell, because that's why they are tares. They are not like us, but if they can make us open up to them and listen to them and control us in that manner, then it's like these mob crowds. They'll, like you're talking about, put people in there, they're starting to lead us. They're doing the chanting. They're doing this. It's like a beat or a shaman. You know, they're getting in, everybody kind of worked up into a frenzy. And then they get you to do things that you normally, like I mentioned earlier, would not do one-on-one. And that's how Satan is using his powers to control humanity, and that's why he's trying to destroy God's wheat by just infiltrating every aspect down to the root of our being to try to cost us our paradise and send us straight into the gates of hell with him.
Right. And they have this written down in their modus operandi, the way that they do this. I mean, even the protocols talk about their infiltration and how they, even any organization, if it is legitimate at one point, even with Christianity initially when it first came together, the ecclesia, the church, but then they take it over. They take over organizations, all these different groups, and they control them from the top down, and they become corrupted. And they have an easy way. Even like there was an individual that wrote a book about how he used to work for the government. I forgot his name. But he worked from the behind the scenes, and he was hired to corrupt. And he talked about how the CIA would get all these countries to buy all this debt, and then that they would strap it onto the people, and that he would use drugs, sex, money, women to corrupt the different dictators that were also installed. And if anybody wanted to actually fight for their people or to support their people, they would be assassinated. I believe he called himself a jackal. I forget the name of the book, but anyways, and so this is the way that they worked, and this is why it's so critical for people to understand, so you don't get caught up in the insanity and get swept away by joining one or the other side, because they are both controlled. Just like with all the efforts in this country during the political season with these different votes or presidential races, how so many people volunteer for this side or that side, and they spend all this time and effort and energy to raise money for the Democrats or the Republicans, and it's two sides of the same coin, and that they use that money just like with the Shriners and the Masons, and how there's all these people at the ground level that are out raising money for them, that have the fire boots out, and the fire on the side of the road. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Joye.
Well, I really wanted to bring that up a lot when I wrote my book, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, about these secret societies, and I even went on to talk about the Skull and Bones Society, which, when you think about when you have a choice of who you're going to elect into a public office, when we were looking at the elections of George Bush Jr. against John Kerry, they both were bondsmen. They were both blood brothers in the Skulls and Bones. So either one of them would have carried our nation in the same direction, even though they were from a total different party. And I think that's the thing, is that they give us a kind of Hegelian principle where they put you at one edge of the spectrum, and they support, like you were saying, this agenda, but then they also come down further down the spectrum and they have this agenda. But what they're moving us along and making us accept things that we would normally not accept, but they're setting the parameters, and then we've got to work within these parameters. So it's kind of like a long time ago, if somebody said something ugly on a TV show, people would write in or call in, and they would get to the sponsors, and the show would be off the air. Now, if it's not full of vulgar and ugly words and every kind of sin that you can possibly do on TV in front of children, I just think that it's all really a setup, where before we would have reacted to it. Now it's a common thing because we are within the parameters that we don't have anything else accessible to us, unless you're usually watching maybe a channel that's solely religious. But your typical programming, even your news, it's still with people making comments and filthiness and everything else. It's just things that we was never put up with when I was a child growing up. I mean, literally, they would have just boycotted whoever was sponsoring the show, and the show was never been on too much longer. So they do have this power. And if you think that you've got a vote, yes, you've got to vote for a part of a plan that they've already established. But, for example, if we just said tonight we want to run this particular person for a government position, if you have got a certain determination to try to free the minds of the common man, and they find out that that's your agenda, you can't even get off the ground, because they're going to run somebody against you that's got plenty of money that they'll literally buy out the vote. And that's a scary thing when you think, well, where are the people at, and why are they putting up with what we've already got going that's wrong? And I've always said, well, it tells you that it's going the way it's supposed to go, or it would be stopped.
Right.
And that's really, really scary, especially people who don't understand even about the skull and bones and the Bohemian Grove and all the Illuminati kinds of curses that they place on their members, and the blood oaths, and
right.
what they do to control people that get involved with them. It is a terrible, terrible thing. And until I started doing a lot of research in that, I just could not get over it. And it's not just that I did just research. I've talked to people who've been in these organizations before, who've come out of them as they've gotten older and then were getting ready to pass away, and be willing to tell, because they figured that nobody could do anything to them. And they were willing to tell somebody like myself who was trying to expose it and to say, you're spot on, but they're going to try to discredit you every which way, because they don't want people to know that that's how our world is being run. They want you to think we're a democracy and we've got, Republican, Democrat, even independent, people that can run, and that everybody has a chance of becoming president one day. Don't hold your breath. I think when I even mentioned this in my book Eden about Jimmy Carter, and of course Jimmy Carter doesn't live too far from where I live, and he was really a peanut farmer, and he was a very intelligent man, and he was in the military, and he did a lot of really outstanding things like that. He was a great governor for Georgia. But when he began running for presidency, he was telling everyone, when I get to be president, I'm going to put Christians in every one of the top major controlling aspects of, agencies that control the world. And as far as the government's control, as far as in the United States. And when he got in office, not one Christian person was ever placed over those organizations. In fact, in his administration, there was more. The Council on Foreign Relations got bigger. All these things that are controlling factors just blossomed. And then, they really discredited him when he was trying to run the second term. I just think that Jimmy was trying to be too much Christian, trying to do it the right way, and they destroyed him. Literally, and to this day, he's really not in what I would say their good graces at any point when he's even on TV. They're always still knocking him and talking about him. So I do think that when you try to look at somebody going up there and doing it the right way, we're past the point of no return as far as having someone that can lead us that is truly who they say they are and not connected to those organizations. You just literally cannot really, on a local level, even run maybe even for sheriff or something really big and not be a member of the local Freemason.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize that and how controlling that is, on a small scale in your own communities. And there's a lot of people then who are deacons in the churches, and that they don't want to hear anybody stand up in the church and talk about Freemasons, because the Freemason oath comes before everything else. It even comes before a person that's married and their wife and their children. So, unfortunately, that's the way it is. And it seems like the reason maybe the parable of the wheat and tares has been kept so kept it like it's wheat and tares, like I'm talking about, like wheat and tares, and not really saying that there's two lineages and that we're fighting against something that's really big. But you and I are trying to expose that, and I hope people will listen.
Hold on, Dr. Joye. We'll be right back, everyone.
Jay, every Sunday from 10 p.m. Eastern to midnight for Researchers on a Mission Radio. We will be interviewing guests in ufology, experts on the paranormal, and stories from you, the listener. Every Sunday, 10 p.m. in Studio B. Join us for some amazing conversations and edge-of-your-seat true thrillers.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Studio B, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday nights. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
A holiday message to our listeners. Revolution Radio is you. Thanks to your continuous support and participation, Revolution Radio will embark on
In its 5th year! Woohoo!
bigger and better than ever. You, the listeners, have made Revolution Radio what it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
On the go? Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons? Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, your carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. Get a pen. Here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world.
And welcome back, everybody, for a second hour. Just really quickly, I do want to tell everybody we appreciate you as a network here at Revolution Radio, and that we consider you to be the wisest of listeners, and that many of you are well advanced in your research and have put forth the time and the effort to be able to understand the world and the reality that we are really dealing with and facing as a people. But that we do, if you can spare it, need your monetary support in order to continue being able to be a platform of truth and to present the information that myself, as well as all the other various hosts that come to you 24/7 on the different hours and different shows. And so if you can, please support Nighthawk in his endeavors to continue with Revolution Radio and to make it grow even greater, and to increase the outreach and to take us to satellite, and that in the 5 years that Revolution Radio has been in existence, we are now the largest listener-supported, commercial-free and corporate-free platform for truth on the planet and on the web, which is really a great accomplishment. Of course, we cannot do it without you. And so please, if you can, do go to freedomslips.com and to donate or subscribe to the archives. You know, there's all these different hosts, and every one of our shows going back to January are found there and freely available to you to download and to share them with all your loved ones, your friends, your family members, your children, parents, grandparents, and that this is a great way to, burn CDs and give them to them so that they can listen to them while they're driving to work and not have to, listen to all the radio stations that are at least 1/3 commercial. So it would be a great, as far as utilization of their time, be greatly beneficial. And so, Dr. Joye, I'd like to get you to talk about any new research, any new projects, anything of interest that you have found recently or that you have been led to discernment on. Also, I know there was one question in the chat room. I'm going to scroll up and try to gather those together, and I'll I'll ask Dr. Joye here in a short bit. But if you would, can you also, because I know there's great interest in your work as far as the Shroud of Turin and its connections to Prince William. If you could talk about that, any news along that front, and with the children being born to Kate, and how all that also ties together with this.
Well, it's one of those things that every time I guess I watch TV or I'm on the internet and I'm looking for certain things that are really red flags, and I do see things that do come across that are quite interesting. I think that some of the things that really just make you stop and go, you've got to really stop and go to yourself, okay, now if this is like this and then this happens, and this is going to send it in this whatever way. And because we know that these powers that be have an agenda, it's quite amazing to me how once you start doing this kind of research, you can kind of feel what direction they're going to pull us and lead us into, and you're not surprised when things really happen as they do. But in saying all that, I think that when I really sit down to put my thoughts together about where are we headed and how close are we to the end of days, I literally have to say that with just, for example, the recent snowfall that just recently fell, and they were saying that this snowfall in this particular area was the same amount in one day that they have for an entire year. And I know this past last week, we had temperatures that broke records in our area, and we broke them by like 7 degrees. And those records have been set some time ago. We're talking about all the way back to when the records were even being kept. It was like 7 degrees lower than it had ever been on that particular day. It's those kinds of things that I try to look for and really think, well, now, is this just nothing to be concerned about, or how does it play into the end of days? And when you start looking at what Revelation really tells us, and it says specifically that these signs, that we need to be prepared to know that when they start getting closer and closer together, that as a woman in travail, that it means that the days are coming that have been promised, according to the book of Revelation, that are not going to be too pretty. And when we talk about the Battle of Armageddon, we talk about, God's great wrath, that's something that is of the Noah flood magnitude. And I think that if you don't grasp the seriousness of why Noah was put on an ark and really sealed in that ark and went through that to start all over in a new situation, then you can't really, I guess, see how in our own society it cannot continue to do what we're doing. Because what's going to happen with these little groups that are really causing problems once they see dissension among people, it's going to, terrorists love that. It's like drawing cards. It's like being trying to get rid of roaches and you leave a little bit of food out. If you keep leaving the food out, the roaches are going to get more and more and more and more and more, and then you can't get rid of the roaches. And that's kind of really what the wheat and terrible is all about, is that you're seeing the encroachment getting so much greater and squeezing us so much harder, that those are the things that I think are important to look at. I think people need to pay attention to vaccination. They need to pay attention to the outbreaks of diseases. And there's a couple of websites that you can go on and look at what are some of the strange things that are happening worldwide. Go to those websites and just keep it in your mind that even though you don't see it on Fox and CBS and ABC and CNN, that those things are happening. It's like I mentioned earlier, and that's one reason why I did my volume 2 of Begal, was to make people start writing these things down, because if you'll just start making notes, well, I heard about this and I heard, you'll start seeing how big a notebook you'll start filling up. and just little things that you just hear on a daily basis, not really just looking for it, but just hearing about it and saying, well, that's kind of strange, I'm going to write that down. And this is kind of strange, I'm going to write that down. And then if you go on a website and you say, well, what happened on, let's say, July the 4th, all the way around the world? And then you start finding there's a lot of things that happen on the same days. And I think that was the thing that was most interesting to me and has been interesting to my research, is that when I first started doing this research years ago, you might have something happen that was significant maybe months apart. And then it might be weeks apart. But now we are having a lot of things happen days and only hours apart. I know the other night I was looking at the amount of earthquakes. And you don't hear about them. I mean, they were in Oklahoma, they were in Texas, they were in places that you just don't see it on the TV. Well, yes, they may only be like 3 or 4 magnitudes, but it's the fact that they're getting to be more and more and more, and they're not in just, let's say, California or New Zealand, places like Japan, places that typically maybe have always had them. You're seeing it happening more and more in places that normally don't have them. So I think that aspect of my research is it has built so big that being able to even keep up a folder of these things has gotten where I can't do it. I mean, it's literally mind-blowing how many things are happening on a daily basis. And I think then we have to look at, if the Bible told us that when these things start happening, you know, for us to look up that our redemption draws nigh, that this is going to be like the days of Noah, all of these kind of things happening, well, then there's also one thing it does tell us, that when those things start happening, there's going to be a man that's going to be walking this earth. It's going to be an iconic image, according to the book of Revelation, and the particular word that John the Revelator used for his word image is really the Greek word for icon. And when you think about what are the icons that were in Christian, we started out as a Christian thing, the first iconic painting or whatever was of Jesus. And when you talk about that this particular icon has these powers and that has control and that he is able to do and rule as a prince, means he has to have a bloodline. He can't just be a rude, run-of-the-mill guy that decides he's going to step up and play like he's a Messiah. He's got to have a bloodline that gives him the rights to full rulership over the Middle East. And he's got to have connections to Assyrians and to pull in the Muslim aspect of the problem. And he's also got to have the connection to King David to be able to say he can rule that area, because according to the Jewish tradition, and what they have been waiting for is for their Messiah to be born, and to be born from that particular lineage. So a person that walks in and says, oh, by the way, I'm ruler, I'm Messiah, I'm here to save the day, well, the Jews that have been waiting all this time would go, well, unless you're a Jew, you're not from the lineage of King David, you can't rule and reign for us. And the Bible specifically tells us it's a prince. So there's a royalty and a royal lineage, and that's why we've always known from the days of Cain and Abel, and why this is so important with the sweet and tears, is that lineage has existed, and that for that lineage to be able to walk in and present themselves as having the capability to rule and reign, they've got to have the pedigree. And these particular royals have their pedigrees in place. You and I I have traced my lineages back to, the ancestors that came over on the boat to America, but most of these people can trace them all the way back to Jesus. And when you see that and their capability to stand and say, I have this right to rule and reign, and then you look at the timing, the things that are happening according to biblical scripture, that was going to be happening when this man comes to reign and rule, you have to go, okay, all this stuff is not a coincidence. It's all got to be happening at the same time. And I guess that's why, in looking at the Shroud of Turin and knowing the hands that have had the capability to take blood from that shroud to make an iconic image, it just is strange to me that we have a man that's almost the age of Jesus when he walked this earth and was crucified, literally living among us with the pedigree of a serpent and the face and body and image of God. And at the same time, all the stuff going on in the world, everything that the Bible's told us is going to happen at the end of the day, you just can't go, well, this is just a coincidence. And then when you know that it's been, people have tried to disprove the shroud, and of course my research shows that the shroud is, the Catholics has always, really the Pope, has always known that it's real deal. I mean, this shroud blood was cloned a long time ago to prove who it belonged to. And that's why, really, when Pope Francis, when he took over, right there at Easter, not too long after he had become Pope, he specifically acknowledged that the shroud definitely has been redated, and it's from the time of Jesus. But most people that don't keep up with this research don't even realize that happened. They're still thinking, oh, it was discredited because the carbon dating was this, and da-da-da. I mean, I hear that all the time. And I'm like, no, look at the recent research on it. And so I've been trying to put together some new images, even at my website, to try to show with William, as he has aged, how much more alike he is in size and structure. Even the way he stands and holds his hands in front of him is a shroud stance. I mean, there's just all these things that you just can't dismiss. And the fact that he has the pedigree, the Bible says that this man we know as 666 is going to have, you just can't dismiss it then. So all those things are still ongoing in my research, but those are the things I also bring up in these books and really try to make people stop and take note. Because it's not that you're just pointing a finger for the fun of pointing a finger, at somebody. I'm trying to literally say, what does the Bible say about this man, his lineage? Who can have the right to rule? Who does have the right to rule? Who has the money and the power to rule and manifest? And for example, when you see William and Kate are about to make their visit to New York, you're going to see roll out the red carpet. You're going to see bowing down. You're going to see the iconic image of a beast, because this is what John the Revelator says, that they will marvel, and they trust, and they think he's the greatest thing since peanut butter. And people say, well, he's such a nice person. But that's what I'm trying to tell people, that when in the Garden of Eden, if the serpent had looked ugly, mean, and cruel, Eve would have run for her life.
Right.
If I had a rattlesnake come upside of me and say, hey, Joy, come over here and take a bite of this apple, or a piece of fruit, I mean, literally, I would have been saying exit stage left.
Right.
So you know that this image that John the Revelator is talking about is not going to be one that's going to have a big sign on his face going, oh, by the way, I'm the most evil person you're ever going to encounter. In fact, he's going to look like Jesus. That's what Satan has always wanted to do. Ever since the Garden of Eden, he was playing like Jesus. He's playing like the Creator. He's playing like God. And that's why he got thrown out of heaven, because he wanted to be that.
Right. All the world will wonder after the beast.
And when we see the royals come to town, I mean, even our iconic people, that are considered the Hollywood elite, they literally are in awe, bowing to him, and all these kinds of things. And, that's the thing, is that you will never see him bow to anyone. It's like the Queen. Everybody that goes to see the Queen, she even wears gloves. She doesn't you don't touch her, and she doesn't touch you with her physical being. I mean, literally. Okay. What is the deal about what's so special? And when you go back and you get it from the beginning, that there's the wheat and the tares, and that the rulers of the kingdoms of this world belong to Satan. And when Jesus was here, Satan took him up and said, hey, you bow down to me, I'll give you these kingdoms. And he said, in fact, Jesus told Pilate, he said, my kingdom's not of this world. So the people who run the kingdoms are not of Jesus. That's why you're never going to see an elected official, because the elected officials are pawns who have been paid and put in place to do the damages by the people that run the show. And that's why we see the all-seeing eye, the pyramid, we see the beehive. It's the whole thing is set up that, I mean, that's why you've got things like Freemasonry and the Rosicrucian. All those secret societies are set up in those hierarchy manifestations because there's a main ruler at the top. And everything is handed out to the worker bees to make sure it gets done. And if we get caught up in those worker bees doings, then that's what they want. They want us to get all fired up and mad and do something stupid, because the more they can make us sin and participate in sin and not think about that we have a blessed spirit within us that was created by God, that God is going to judge. You know, we're not thinking when we get ourselves all riled up and get in midst of fits and not thinking, and violence and sexual perversions and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, they want us to be distracted and led astray and lost and wayward, and they're doing a really good job at, antagonizing people in that way and getting our minds off of what is real and relevant and should be important. Putting the focus on the kingdom and really making our eternal inheritance through Christ and salvation important. Most people don't hold it of any importance at all, don't consider the gospel or spirituality or anything of that nature, as a priority for their lives. And so he has succeeded, and that's why the elect is but a few, a minority, that many are chosen, but few heed the call. So,
and in the days ahead, it's going to be like the days of Noah. As it came closer to the flood, there was less of the pure people of God who were following God. And there comes a time, even in Revelation, where it says that if the time's not cut short, that even flesh wouldn't survive it. So we're getting to the point that with everything that's happening, and the mixing that's going on, and the playing around with the DNA, and the change-up of our foods and what we're consuming. I mean, I mention all these kinds of things in my books. They're all leading to one thing, and that is the destruction of God's wheat. And there's going to come a time when there's not but so many left, not but so many left of the lineage of Adam and Eve, that God said, enough is enough. I mean, we're to the point. And we're heading down that road very, very fast, and it's very scary, because I see so many people who think they can just do whatever because they've been listening to people say, "Oh, well, God loves everybody. He's a good God. He's not going to ever. I mean, he won't hurt anybody." And I'm thinking, have you read even the Old Testament, where those people that didn't do what he said do back in the day, he opened up the earth and swallowed them up? I mean, these were Israelites he did that to. So if he would do that to what I would call the purest of pure from the garden, then we don't have a prayer if we don't follow what he's saying. And I know a lot of people get really upset about this homosexual agenda, and I saw something on TV the other day where they had dismissed a guy, and I think it was either a police chief or a sheriff or something, and because he'd written a book about homosexuality, they got rid of him. And I'm like, okay, the Bible tells us it's wrong. It tells us that's wrong. It tells us adultery's wrong. It tells us all these sins are wrong. If you don't say they're wrong, then you're not telling the truth.
Right.
And it seems to me, when the Bible says that people will want to, itching ears and hear these different doctrines, because if we can twist it around, then that means that we can, do adultery and not be worried about it, and we can do homosexuality and not be worried about it, and we can molest children and not be worried about it. I mean, we can keep playing with it and changing it around to the point that we don't have any scruples whatsoever, and our conscience doesn't work, so therefore we don't have any conviction. And if you don't have conviction, then you won't seek salvation. And to me, that's where the churches are headed.
Yes, and the world. And America, goodness. We'll be right back for final segment. Okay, Dr. Joe, we did have a few questions from the chat room, but you did touch upon these. But I'll ask just to clarify some of the points that they were making. They wanted to there, Doc asked about updates on Prince William, which you spoke on, but could you talk about his credentials, his connections to secret societies, the background, and why it is that he can, assume the role and the authority, the kingship of Antichrist? And then the other question, just so you know, you can cover this as well. Anything new as far as the rapture, the tetrad blood red moons, as far as the end date for Daniel's timeline, the Feast of Trumpets, September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign of the heavens, if you could speak on that.
Well, I think the first question about William is that I don't think a lot of people understand that the British Empire, that the reigns of that empire really has touched every facet of the world. And at one time it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. People, if they're not aware of the wealth that the British royals have and how there's been so much interbreeding that has gone on really for centuries to set up what we call their royal power, and that they originally came from the Germans, different name, and they changed their name to Windsor to try to anglicize their name and not be able to really connect you back to Hitler and the crowd there in Germany. But their connection to the Rothschild family, and of course Rothschild has his name imprinted on all the gold, and then you've got the city of London. And if anybody has ever been to the city of London, if you haven't, if you pull it up on the web, you can look that there are huge manifestations of statues of nothing but true serpents. They're not snakes. They're really serpent dragons all through the city of London. And the fact that the crown is there, in which our lawyers answer to here in the United States, and the fact that our Constitution really wasn't re-ratified, I guess, after our big war, and that we're still kind of a corporation, and that we really kind of still owned by Britain, and that explains a little bit why when we go to do anything, we've got to make sure Britain's telling us, or that we're going with them, or Britain's with us, and there's a little more to it than us just being close buddies. There's a major tie in all that. But the thing about it is, it's the fact that you've got this serpent lineage that is connected to the world banking establishment, and that they set the price for the gold. And of course, with the royal family, they own literally everything. In fact, Queen Elizabeth is the wealthiest person in the entire world. And if you really look at what William has got as far as lineage tying him by pedigree to Diana and Charles, even though if he was a clone of Jesus, he would not have the blood of either one of them running through his veins. But he has pedigree because he was birthed from Diana, and his father, whether it be stepfather, legal guardian father, his Charles, gives him the right to the throne. In that aspect, the divinity actually, the cloned image Jesus, he has the perfect right. He has the perfect right to the throne there, and of course, because Britain and the royals are who they are and have the connection back through their lineage to King David. They literally the only people on the face of this earth that have the right to be able to rule and reign from Israel. And you have to remember that it was the British who allowed Israel to do what it's done and establish itself. But their connections with Hitler and that kind of stuff, they try to keep it minimized. And I tried to expose that, and I think that people will remember that there was a big fiasco about Prince Harry when he dressed up as a Nazi and went to a costume party. That there was a little more to that than would meet the eye, and it caused a lot of problems. But at the same time, it was really, I guess, tying in to explain that there is a major connection between their bloodlines, because the bloodline does go back and pick up into Khazarian bloodlines that were from the Assyrian, and of course the Book of Daniel does talk to us about the Assyrian, and the Assyrian lineage would be the lineage more than likely that the Antichrist would come from, and we've heard, the talk of the tribe and lineage of Dan, and in this last volume 3, I tried to tie together those the Edomites, the Syrians, the Dans. Of course, they were in Dan's territory, in the lineage of Dan, and so you can get a great understanding as to how they eventually migrated to Europe, and then how Gog and Magog, how those giants, there were literally giants named that lived in the area of Britain, and why Gog and Magog are celebrated in their festivals still there, and how that's all tied to William and to the royal family. So there is literally not a person on this planet that has a definite connection, whether he be from the pedigree of the connection between Charles and Diana, or whether he be an exact copy of Jesus from that Shroud of Turin. He literally has the right to rule and reign over as the great I Am from that any place that would be built there for somebody to rule that area. And I do think that it's most interesting to me that the word, when it says, when we look at Thessalonians and some of the scripture, specifically when Jesus said about the temple, we got to stop and think about the rebuilding of the temple. We've heard the rebuilding of the temple, and that the Antichrist will walk in and proclaim himself to be God and say that he is God and standing in the temple of God. Well, the temple of God, literally temple, when Jesus was here, he called his body the temple.
Right.
And he said he was going to raise it up in 3 days, and that's what he did. And, of course, the Pharisees and Sadducees were like, well, it took him 40 years to build that. You just know what you're going to raise it up in 3 days. We weren't talking about the physical building. He was talking about it himself. So, you have to stop and think. John the Revelator saw that. And it was he mentioned in this same temple in that same aspect, and I kind of believe he was by the way he has used the word image and icon, and how the beast would be made to speak, and the false prophet would have control of that. And of course, I really tie all that together to the false prophet being the Pope, and that they'd had the Shroud of Turin, and they had given the rise to the image of the beast, and it will be worshipped that way. So there's so much. I mean, I wish I could just really kind of bring it down into just an easy way to say it. But the rich royals, along with the Vatican's wealth, and having the Pope and the Queen uniting, and the connection of the Jesuits with all that, and their secret German connections. I mean, I have so much that's in this book, but more than anything, that literally. Charles, when he went to name William, he wanted to name William Arthur. He wanted him to be King Arthur. And I tell you, Diana really put up a fit and wouldn't agree to it. And so then they put Will I Am Arthur. So it's kind of like, well, I still am King Arthur. I mean, it's just a play on words. And of course, and then when I see this singer guy that's Will I Am, I'm thinking, yeah, is that like telling us to think about Will I Am, Arthur? Because that was Charles the same. And it's another funny thing that William was never named after his dad. All fathers usually name their first children after their name, but William doesn't have that in his name. So it's very interesting why he's so much different than everybody else. And of course, then I go even deeper and tie into comments that Diana made about being a birthing chamber, and that she was used as a birthing chamber, and
also when he was born.
Oh yes. I mean, every bit of this stuff. I mean, between my books, Beguiled, and then the book Eden that I wrote before these, I've tried to put everything that could literally prove that this is all a funny little setup, and there's too much to just say, well, this is just a mere coincidence that he looks like Diane off of this route. There's just too many things, the way he was born, when he was born, the day he was born, when he was, what time he was born, where he was born at. I mean, there's just one thing after the next, and you just can't say. It's just like you can't say that we're not living in end times when you start looking at the fish dying and the people dying and all the things happening in the universe, and there's too many. It's too much of it. It can't be all conspiracy theory or just a matter of coincidence. There's too much of it, and it's too much right in line with what the Bible tells us is going to happen at the end of the day. So it's pretty mind-boggling, really.
Can you clarify when he was born, just for those that don't know what we're talking about?
He was born on the 21st of June, and that's on the summer solstice at the highest point, and it's the movement between into the Gemini, and Gemini, of course, in the constellations were the twin, and the thing about cloning is that instead of it just being like a twin, where you have twins and there can be an evil and a good twin, and twins like that. But this same thing when you clone somebody, you're surpassing even what a twin would be, because you're literally making them into exactly the holographic image of the initial person or initial being that was cloned. They're not really truly what you would call a twin, but all of that falling together like that and pointing to those change-ups like that, you have to just go, well, this is really kind of strange. Diane even said he was born in a king's star, and all this. There's just so many little tidbits of information, even why he married, and why he doesn't wear a wedding band, and how that ties into the St. Catherine prophecies, and the fact that he marries a girl that's named Catherine, and she wears the wedding band like St. Catherine, but yet Jesus didn't wear a wedding band. Oh, and I try to tie all of that together.
St. Catherine prophecy? Can you?
Oh, yes. And that is absolutely amazing to me, because, there's always speculation that more than likely the Antichrist would never marry. And there was speculation that he would be homosexual. But at the same time, it was like there was just this funny stuff about it, and I would try to play that out in my mind, like how could that be this way, and how could that be that way, and what would that mean? And of course, we know that when William married Catherine, that it put him on a world stage. It set him to the next level. It set him up to be able to be a king and be looked at as a king. So there's reasons why, leverage, and as we well know, these people are tricksters. They use beguilement. And if you think about him having connections that he has, I kind of thought in the very beginning that he would not try to do that, because, there's always been the New Age agenda that probably Mary Magdalene married Jesus, and that's how some of this Merovingian bloodline came about, that literally the royals still claim to. They believe in that connection. So when you look at the New Age Jesus agenda, he's following in line of that as well, because if Jesus, according to esoteric, married Mary Magdalene and they had 3 children, well, he's already got one. He's on the second one. Is he going to follow through and do a third and match that New Age Jesus agenda to kind of link to that Merovingian true esoteric connection of a Jesus, which would be great, because people will more than likely like the new Jesus, not the Jesus that we know is the Savior, from which the clone could have been made from. So there's all that I try to tie together in the Begal series that kind of explains why the secret marriage and even their wedding, the things in their wedding. I tried to put that all in this Begal series, because that was important. And all the stuff that happened in the Olympic Games in 2012 that was there, all these little symbols and stuff, all matched, making him king and setting him up, and it literally the fact that he is a helicopter pilot, that he flies under the dragon name. I mean, there's just on and on, one thing after the next in my third book about that. But I don't think a lot of people really understand about the Kate comparison to St. Catherine of Siena back in 1347. She lived from 1347 to 1380. But she supposedly had a marriage. She married Jesus and was in a mystical body, and that he placed a ring on her finger, but there was never a ring placed on Jesus' finger. So if you're not familiar with that particular Catholic nun and her canonization, you need to really get into that, because it connects why I really believe that we have Catherine married to William.
Okay, and there was, I don't know if you heard, but there was recently supposedly some ancient text that just came to light, and that speaks about that Christ was married to Mary, the Virgin Mary, is what the text says. So how crazy is that? Married to his own mother.
Well, that would tie in to what happened with the lineage with Ham. And
right.
Him having sex with Noah's, well, I believe it was either Noah's wife at the time, whether it be his mother or his father's wife. The connection is that purebred lineage had to manifest using the mother, so that you bring it back to a thoroughbred dominant DNA of serpent lineage. And the mothers always, married their sons, and the sons married their sisters, and so that all that DNA stayed perfect serpent lineage. So again, that would be a new Jesus agenda. That would be an esoteric kind of new Jesus agenda to be able to tie back that way, because they want to make even the Olympics in London. They tied Nimrod. They literally was showing Nimrod and why there was a connection in the serpent lineage. Oh gosh, and I go into that in my book as well, because it really does tell you what's going on and why it was played out like it was played out.
Well, Dr.
But these new things, like, for example, the newly found document that was supposed to be that Jesus performed a miracle, that was going all over the internet, and of course that was a false document. Upset me so bad, because I thought it was a new something that had been found, and then come and find out in Snoops.com that somebody had just played that up and made it look like it was real, and it was not real. I think that's a good example of what we're living in days. And these end days are scary then, because you can't trust, you don't know the truth from the lie.
Right, absolutely. A quick question from Doctor Who. Are Kate and William cousins?
Yes, they are. And they're both Jewish. And I show that lineage and I tie that all together in this final book too, because of the connection to who Diana was the daughter of. And that's not been exposed a whole lot either. It's kind of like when people thought that, when Charles married Diana, that she was just nothing but a commoner. I tried to show that she was not a commoner.
Right.
And Kate's not a commoner either, but they want people to literally believe that, then, because if they can keep us thinking that they are really caring about us and that they're going to let the commoners have their heart, and that they're servants, and that they're here to help us, and they're charities and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a play. It's a play on our thoughts, on our minds, on our emotions, on our knowledge. And if we don't start telling people about this agenda, well, they're just, and they have been running wild with it. I mean, literally controlling the world, and they still are, and they will control it right on up until Jesus comes back, because they're going to keep us so mad at each other that we can't rise up in the right way and say, we're tired of being ruled by the tares. It's time for the wheat to take over. It's going to take really the return for that to happen. And I do think that because the days are like they are, that we're the generation going to see that.
Absolutely. Dr. Joye, we've got 3 minutes remaining. There's so much more I wanted to ask you, and that we wanted to cover, even talking about with the second wife of Noah and how they made it through the flood and all that, and then there was a question.
Well, let's just plan that we'll do another show. We'll look at the calendar and try to do another show again, Zen.
Okay,
There's just
great.
been so much happening, and it's always so good to be able to just freely talk about all of this. And like I say, there are points in my book, because it's so vast with the topics that I cover, that we could do a whole new show and not even touch on what we've talked about tonight.
Right. And before we do end this show, Dr. Joye, we've got 2 minutes remaining. Please mention your website where people can go to support your work if they wanted to ask you a question, how they can contact you and all of that. And then, yes, we will set up another show as soon as we can.
They can just go to the website. It's www, and it's Dr. Joye, DrJoye.com. Make sure you put an E on that, Joye, JOYE.com. And you can link to all the books, and then also there's a place there that you can make a contact to me if you need to ask a question. And I do try to answer my emails, but I can't do a long email. I know sometimes I get a question and I'm like, how do I answer that when it took me 7 years to
right.
in a book, But if I can kind of give you an idea and give you a place to go or tell you which book it's in, then hopefully, you can either go get the book or I at least can give you something that will give you an answer and you feel comfortable and you can deal with it and move on with your own research.
Right. Yeah, people ask me the same thing and expect me to rehash all this research. And, yeah, I just lead them to a specific show. But, Dr. Joye, I appreciate you taking the time to join us again. And I do implore the listening audience to please to continue to pray for Dr. Joye and her husband, Mel, for good health and well-being and stabilization and, quality of life and rest and relaxation as well, and balance.
Well, I sure do appreciate that because we've really had an ordeal to deal with here. So my research and being able to sell my books and do radio shows, I'm limited to what I can do now because of our situation. So we do appreciate your prayers in that aspect.
Well, everybody, we will be back next week, and I'll follow up on this with the parable of the sower and other aspects tied to this. Thank you, Dr. Joye.
Good night.
Good night.